it's like the epitome of hopping from diet trend to diet trend, the same way you're trying to talk to a few different people at once and maybe keep your options open, so to speak. And okay, like I get it. I want to meet people. And so again, I'm not trying to say something about him. It's just like to see the behavior that everyone talks about, that like when you're sitting at dinner with a group of girlfriends and you're catching each other up on like which guy you're talking to right now and what's going on with him and what happened with the last one. This is why that culture is so prevalent. And it plays into this idea that we're not willing to be focused on one thing or consistent with one thing.
Let's link up with Krysta on The Fix. She's a wellness coach with a focus on mental well-being and physical strength.
Hey there, Fix listeners. Welcome back to our latest episode of the Fix podcast. I'm your host, Krysta Huber, and to round out the month of August, I've got a solo episode for you guys. And we're going to have a little fun with this one. I am going to talk about some in real life examples of how I feel that the way people date today, myself included, conversations I have with my girlfriends, mostly the frustrations we talk around dating apps, trying to meet people, putting yourself out there, everything that comes with that. And what we observe in the wild, if you will, because I got this idea for this episode from something I witnessed the other night when I was out. And how there are so many parallels to dating culture today and diet culture. And while I don't subscribe to this idea of how you do one thing is how you do everything, I do believe that a lot of our desires for instant gratification, our thought processes around wanting results the way you may want to be in a relationship, there are a lot of things that just coincide. And I thought it would be kind of funny to talk about dieting in this context to help you actually see that some of the things you're doing to yourself are forms of self-sabotage when it comes to weight loss and it comes to fat loss. And when you think about it in the context of a different example, like dating and relationships, it can actually help you understand, one, why you're stuck, and two, why the approaches you're taking are not working and what you can actually do differently. Now, if you're in a relationship, I still think you'll get something out of this episode because chances are you know someone who's single and you've heard them talk about their dating experiences. But two, I have some thoughts in here around being in the wrong relationship as well, because I think that's very much a factor in some of the ways that people diet. So I'm going to get to that one as an example. And I'm also going to pull from trends on the internet of different reels and memes and things like that you've definitely seen. There's been a hot one over the summer about looking for a guy in finance. And I think there are some good parallels to that as well. So that said, there is something in this episode for everybody. And I think it'll just give you a good laugh. If anything, it also might help you kind of call you out on your own bullshit, whether that comes to dating or whether it actually comes to the way you are trying to approach your fitness and nutrition. So let's dive into it. Last night, I'm recording this episode after a weekend of going out with my friends. And I was at a bar and I saw an interaction. I love to people watch. So if you don't know me, if you're new to this podcast and you don't know a whole lot about me, one thing I do want to add to kind of set the scene for this situation is I love people watching. I think the way human beings interact with each other is so fascinating. I'm very observant. And my own experiences with dating in the last several years, I will just say were not necessarily expected, because there may be some of you out there who don't know my story. And had I made some different decisions about 4 years ago, I would have been 4 years married. So I was thrust back into the world of dating apps, never expecting to really be on them. I did not meet my previous partner on one. And I think it is definitely a way to meet people, but I think the culture attached to it has just created not the best environment and a lot of like mixed messages, people wanting the next thing that's around the corner. And that's very much parallel with dieting. So I'm going to get there. But that said, I'm at this bar and I am watching this guy interact with a female. She was kind of with a group of friends and she went to go order a drink. He was sitting eating something at the bar, had ordered himself a drink. They start talking and he asks her for her phone number. She must have like written it down on the back of a receipt or something like that. And then she left with her group of friends to go somewhere else. What I then saw happen next is the funny part of this. And it's funny, but it's also just like the reality of the world that we live in today. So I had watched this interaction from one side of the bar. My friends and I walk around to the other side because we wanted to close out our tabs. And at this point, I'm now standing behind this guy and I can see his phone. And he's holding up his phone like in a way that anybody like within a few feet of him could definitely see it. So was I being a little nosy? Maybe. But I went right up next to him so that I could ask for the check for my drink. And he like said hello to me. And I was like kind of laughing to myself because I'd watched this interaction of him talking to this one woman, get her number, she leaves. Then we come around to the other side of the bar. He's like kind of looking at me, my friends. But the funny part about it was when I saw him pick up his phone, he did two things. The first thing he did was when he opened his phone, I could see that he was like pulling up his contacts because he was saving the number of the girl he had just met in this bar. And I'm positive because I was close enough to see that instead of putting her last name, which he didn't have, he wrote down the location of where we were at. So he does that. The second he hits save, he immediately opens Bumble to a conversation that he must have actively been having with somebody because I could see like a couple messages. I couldn't read it, but I could see like some like emojis and like a little GIF of something he said sent back and forth, but it was an active conversation. So this guy, and I want to be clear, I'm not trying to make this out to be like, oh, guys are doing this because I think there are 1,000% females doing the same exact thing. So I want to really emphasize the fact that I'm just giving the context, the anecdote for why I thought this was a good topic. And it has everything to do with what I watched. It has nothing to do with being a guy versus a girl. There are plenty of women doing this because of the environment and the culture around dating today. So he's having this conversation with this girl, and I'm standing there just kind of laughing to myself, thinking about the fact that like he's having this virtual conversation. He just met this other woman, and he is clearly trying to keep his options open and just like have as many things going as he can at once. This is where you as a single female are like cringing. And I pointed it out to my friends, and one of them said to me, she's like, this is why I don't want to be on dating apps. But here's the thing. It doesn't matter if you are not on dating apps because the other person that you could meet organically in real life could do exactly what I witnessed. The first woman he talked to, I don't know if she's on a dating app. I know he is. And I did happen to see her after going to another bar and like she was out talking to other people. So arguably it is the same concept that we could have had 15 plus years ago when there were no dating apps or social media where you could meet multiple people and get multiple numbers in the same night. However, what I think is crazy about it is like, as soon as he got this one person's phone number, I saw him send a text so that she had his number. And then he immediately opens this dating app to continue a conversation or like pick a conversation back up. And it's just like, you're out right now, having dinner, potentially trying to meet people, maybe just like enjoying your Saturday night. Why do you need to immediately go engage somebody on another app, right? So I think this plays into several things when it comes to thinking about the same kind of thought process around how we see fat loss. The first is it's like the epitome of hopping from diet trend to diet trend, the same way you're trying to talk to a few different people at once and maybe keep your options open, so to speak. And the reason why I mean keep your options open is because like this guy was not worried or wasting any time waiting for that person he just met to text him back. He was like, okay, cool. I got to keep going with this next thing. And okay, like I get it. I want to meet people. And so again, I'm not trying to say something about him. It's just like to see the behavior that everyone talks about, that like when you're sitting at dinner with a group of girlfriends and you're catching each other up on like which guy you're talking to right now and what's going on with him and what happened with the last one. This is why that culture is so prevalent. And it plays into this idea that we're not willing to be focused on one thing or consistent with one thing. So it's one, this idea of hopping from one diet trend to the next, trying something for 30 days and deciding that it does not work. Look, when it comes to dating, if you go on one date and you're immediately not feeling the vibes, trust me, I do not continue on multiple dates with that person. But if I like the person, I am very cautious about deciding how serious I want to be with them until I consistently see them on a regular basis, which you would then think, okay, if I'm potentially sitting in front of a coach like Krysta and talking to her about my fitness and nutrition, and she's asking me to stick with something for 30 days, that shouldn't be that surprising because realistically, the relationship you're meant to be in, one that's healthy, one that's a quality relationship, it's going to be built on consistency, regularly speaking to that person, talking to them on the phone, texting. It doesn't have to be constant, but like there's a consistency to it. There isn't the whole, I'm waiting for when he's going to text me. I don't know if I'm going to hear from her. Like, how should I kind of like play this out and wait for that timing? Like, you know, that you want to regularly see this person. You are going to express that to them. You're going to communicate that way. You are going to make yourself available, et cetera, et cetera. And yet, when it comes to us thinking about losing body fat, so many people out there are like, oh, the scale didn't move like 5 pounds within a week. So clearly this isn't working. Says who? There are so many factors that can influence what moves the scale on a daily basis that the same way you may want to give multiple dates with a person as you get to know them to decide if they're a fit for you. We want to take that same approach when we think about our diet, especially when we're looking for something that is the forever solution. The same way you wouldn't want to date a certain type of person that you know your values are not aligned because it's not going to be for the long haul. If you're looking for something long term, if you're looking for something permanent, why in the world would you pick an approach to dieting that also isn't that permanent? And let's talk about some ways that it might not actually be permanent. One of them has to do with restriction. And this is where I'm going to expand to trends and things on social media, conversations I have with my girlfriends, guys, all of it. There's a trend, and I mentioned this at the beginning of the episode, that was going around at the beginning of the summer, maybe like Memorial Day or a little later than that. And it was like this, it got turned into a song. And if you don't know it, go look it up. And it's this idea of like, I'm looking for a guy in finance. He's 6'5", he has blue eyes and a trust fund. That list of criteria, it's actually been debunked, and like there was some research put into the statistics and how unlikely it would be to even find that person, especially for that height, having blue eyes, all the factors, is very much the same type of mindset of putting yourself into a box, of restricting yourself around what foods you should and should not eat. So here you are setting up filters on a dating profile, even if you're not actively like setting up the filters, but maybe you're like going through and you're looking and you're seeing the career that a person says that they are, and you're like literally swiping against them and swiping left or right, right if you want to match with them, left if you don't want to, because you don't like the career that they're in. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with having some thoughts around this, but it shouldn't just be because, oh, like this is the trend that's going on and this is what everybody's saying they want, or making assumptions that a person like makes a lot of money based on the career that they have. Like there could be a person out there who's just so passionate about what they do, and maybe you as an individual are also really passionate about what you do, that is actually the criteria of what you're looking for to determine your compatibility. But the problem is, you wouldn't know that if you keep putting these filters and these limitations on things. The same way you decide the only way for you to lose weight is if you don't eat any carbohydrates. Well, how long does that last you? What happens in the long run? If you say, hey, I'm not going to eat any carbs, or hey, I'm not going to eat this certain food, you start thinking about it a little more, right? And the more you think about it, the more you're like, oh, I want to eat this thing. Eventually you go back to it. Maybe you eat so much of it that then you feel guilty about that. And that cycle brings a whole parallel that I actually did a podcast episode on with a guest of mine. This was a while back. She had written a book comparing diets to like toxic relationships. And this is what we talked about for the bulk of the episode is like, you're putting these restrictions in place and all these expectations that are maybe like more surface level type expectations of a person. The same way you're saying, I can't eat this food. I shouldn't have that. I have to skip this event. I need to spend X amount of time in the gym. I have to, only to then find yourself falling into a pattern of dating this typical type of person who does not seem to be your forever person because you continue to date versus being in a long-term relationship. And yet you're like so stuck on that and you can't figure out why it isn't working for you, but you still keep going back to it. It's like going back to the person who you know your values are not aligned. You maybe don't want the same things for your future. You argue a lot, whatever it is. And yet you continue to try to find a way back to that specific person and continue to be stuck in what people call a situationship and literally let yourself get emotional and upset about it instead of recognizing, hey, there is another person out there who can give me the things that I want and what I desire and will treat me the way I'm looking to be treated in a relationship. But you're sitting there just like so obsessed over this one person. And we do the same thing. I have this conversation so regularly with people who are potentially going to join our coaching program saying, oh yeah, like 5 years ago, it really worked for me when I did this, this, and this. So I just started doing that again. And funny thing, it's not working. The fact that it's not working, and yes, maybe you didn't give it 30 days, which could also be part of it, but the fact that it's not working should tell you something about why it's not a fit for you. Again, the same way you wouldn't continue to date somebody. Let's give a very specific example. Let's say you're dating and you really want to have kids, and this person is like, I don't want to have children. Would you continue to date them in hopes to try to just change their mind? That's a pretty big decision to be made. And maybe they've already made their mind up. And if they've told you black and white that they do not want them, why continue to date that person? Yet there's other things about them. They're like, oh, well, I really like this and I like that. And we have fun together and we do these things and whatever. And yet you are stepping over a very important detail just because you like how they make you feel at this current present moment in time. Kind of like how you're looking for that instant gratification of seeing the scale go down like 4 or 5 pounds because you literally just restricted your calories so much only to then have 2 weeks go by and you go out to dinner, you have a couple of drinks, and all of a sudden, all of the weight comes back on because really you didn't lose body fat. You just lost some water by not having any carbohydrates. This next point is probably my favorite. And I'm going to give credit to one of my friends because when we started talking about this, I was like, oh, I'm going to turn this into a podcast episode. What do you think? And she mentioned this. And this has everything to do with nailing the basics. When it comes to our fitness and nutrition, if I had $1 for every time, even current clients asked me questions about very minor details, as in, what is the best time to eat a certain meal? Or should I be doing fasted cardio or fasted workouts when they're not even actually consistently hitting a protein goal on a daily basis, when they're barely getting 6-7 hours of sleep per night, when they are not being consistent with their workout routine, when they're going out on the weekend and barely tracking their food. That has a very big parallel to the games that a lot of people play when it comes to dating and saying, hey, like I'm looking for somebody who texts me regularly, somebody who calls me regularly, has a open line of communication, and you establish what your expectations around that communications are. Looking for somebody and also being a person who can show up with substance, with giving that communication back, with being present, with being a good listener. These are all things that should be like basic aspects of being in a relationship. And yet I will talk to friends about relationships that they've been in where they're telling me a story about XYZ thing happened. And it is so glaringly obvious that the person is a terrible communicator. They're not present. They're not showing up. Or maybe even the friend may be acting like that person because something else is going on in their life or they're not communicating something. I can share one story about this because it's a friend of a friend. I had a friend who told me a story about their friend who was in a situation where they'd spent a lot of money and they didn't feel comfortable going to their partner. They were married, going to their partner to say, hey, I can't cover my car insurance for this month. So they asked my friend to support them instead. If you can't communicate to the person that you're married to about your finances, you got to take a step back and ask yourself, what's the bigger issue here beyond the money itself, right? Like take the money out of it. It's the fact that you don't feel comfortable to have this conversation with this person. That is the same principle of saying to yourself, oh, I should really think about the fact that like I need to make sure that I'm doing my workouts in the morning at 6 a.m. And even though I'm waking up at 5:30, I shouldn't be doing them fasted because that's going to spike my cortisol levels. And my cortisol levels are too high because I'm super stressed about this at work and this with my kids and this with my partner and da da da. You just got yourself more stressed out by even focusing on this because you're also the person who's not getting enough sleep and is barely eating 100 grams of protein. What I like to say to clients is we are stepping over $100 bills to pick up pennies, dimes, quarters. Why would we do that? We have to think about the bigger picture. And in that example, the bigger picture is, hey, why do you have an issue communicating with your partner about something? Again, doesn't matter the topic. This was just what popped into my head. Is the same way that you shouldn't be concerned about whether you're doing a fasted workout when you lack the basic consistency with what I like to call the big rocks, the things that are the most important to actually get you operating in a way where your health and you feeling well and you prioritizing your well-being are just like standards for yourself. They're non-negotiables. It's like, this is the way that I show up. I am the person who 6 out of 7 nights is getting the 8 hours plus sleep, is tracking my food because I have enough respect for myself to do those things because I know that when I do those things, I feel good about myself. The same way, you don't want to be stuck in this cycle of being with the person who you don't really feel that great when you're around or you're constantly arguing with, or whatever it is. And ultimately, all of this just goes back to this idea of wanting shortcuts, of wanting the instant gratification. And I don't know why you would want instant gratification when the people that you spend the most time with in your life, your partner, is one of the most important, if not most important decisions that you can make. But I'd also argue the way you take care of yourself is one of the most important decisions that you can make because the way you take care of yourself or choose not to take care of yourself is going to dictate the rest of your life. Now, this last point could be like a totally different podcast episode, but you taking care of yourself, I want to expand on this last point of like self-respect and having that standard is never going to just like intrinsically be the way you show up if you don't work at it, if you don't build that consistency. If it's not how you are right now, I don't want to sit here and be like, oh, well, that means you just have no respect for yourself. It actually means that you don't feel good about something and you're using the inconsistency, you're using the food, you're using, staying up late on your phone and that being the reason, scrolling, being the reason why you're not getting good night's sleep as a Band-Aid for something else within you that you are not addressing. And when you can get to a place of saying, hey, when I take a walk for 20 minutes first thing in the morning, instead of waking up and immediately looking at my phone, I feel really good. When you can start to notice that and you can start to pay attention to that, it's going to change the way how you operate. The same way a bad breakup where it really rocks you, or it really puts different things into perspective, or it really makes you reconsider what you want out of your life, the type of people you want to surround yourself with, where you see yourself going in the next 5 years, can cause you to do a big 180 and make different decisions. So these things really do go hand in hand. But if anything, if we think about what it takes to want to be able to attract a certain type of partner, and I've done a couple episodes on this, it's you showing up as that person and you owing it to yourself, because the relationship you have with yourself is the most important one. And everything we do inside of the Fitness Fix is you refining and reconnecting with and getting clearer on what you want that relationship with yourself to look like. That is a lot deeper than macronutrients. That is a lot bigger than how many times per week you're going to the gym. And that is because everything that threatens or that potentially like throws you off your path of being consistent, of maintaining that discipline for yourself, has everything to do with all of this other stuff that's happening in your life and the way you think about it, the way you manage your stress, all of it. So that's my hot take on thinking about dating and dieting. And so here's a question I want you to ask yourself. If you don't want to be, and you're not, let's say you are in a relationship, or if you are actively looking to be in a relationship and you want to be in one that's healthy, or you are in one that's healthy, why isn't the relationship that you have with yourself a healthy one too? And that has everything to do with the choices that you make in terms of what you're putting into your body, what time you're going to bed at night, you honoring the commitments that you make to yourself with your schedule, with your routine, with going to the gym, with taking time to just be with yourself, with managing your stress, and everything that comes along with that. So that's all I got for you guys. If this resonates with you, if you feel like you need support cultivating that relationship with yourself, I'm going to give a little tough love to end the episode. We are approaching Labor Day weekend. Summer's over. Had to be the one to say it, but it is. And if you want to hold yourself to a higher standard so that by this time next summer, you feel great about the decisions you're making in terms of both living your best life and enjoying yourself and feeling confident in your clothes and the way you show up on a daily basis, then let's have a conversation about coaching. Our Fitness Fix clients know that we have seasons where we focus on having a little more fun and flexibility. We have seasons where we put our heads down and we tighten things up a little bit and we put in a little more work. But collectively, what we map out over the course of a year and working together is when those seasons make sense for you. For a lot of people, the window that we're coming up on between September and Thanksgiving is a great time to focus on fat loss. But it would be a lot easier if you started sooner. And it will also help you to start now so that when you roll into the holidays, you have more structure in place. You have more of that respect for yourself that you want to establish ready to go and just a part of who you are, your normal, how you show up every single day. And you don't have to do that alone. So down in the show notes, there is a link to apply to one-on-one coaching. Let's have a conversation. It needs to be a fit on both sides. So literally no strings attached. I want to see how I can support you and see if you're right for our community. Just come check it out. If you have questions, if you're like, I'm not even ready to do that, send me a DM at the Krysta Huber. I'm happy to chat there anytime. And with that, from wherever you're listening from, I hope you guys have the best Labor Day weekend. If you are listening to this the day that the episode drops, and let's get ready to have a kick-ass September. See you guys next week.